You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
Hey, Los Angeles. Welcome back to the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network, live on the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio. This is your Chargers segment of the show, Chargers edition for podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm Ryan Dyer, joined as always by the madman Jamal Madney. This show, as always, brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Gets you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. NBA playoffs around the corner. My Nuggets clinched the number 1 seed. Where are the Lakers at right now? They're in what, the 7th seed right now?
Yeah, the 7-hole. Crushing loss last night to the Clippers. Big one tomorrow, tonight, I should say, against Phoenix. I think that's going to determine whether they can sneak back into the playoffs or be forced to have a play-in situation. So huge one tonight with the Suns. And let's see if Durant should be good to go. So it should be a very compelling game. Hard to believe. It might be the first time in 5 years that LeBron and Durant are sharing a court together.
Yeah, crazy. So you got that. You got the LA Kings clinched playoffs as they had, I think, the best March of any NHL team. So they're killing it right now. So any of that you can bet on at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag, promo code BELIEVE. Tell them the guys at LA Football Network sent you. So talking all things Chargers for the next 20 minutes or so here on radio and on podcast. A lot of excitement around this team. Draft just about 20 days away. We did our first official mock draft on our live show just a couple days ago. So if you didn't see that, check that out at lafbnetwork.com and let us know what you think, who you want the Chargers to take at pick 21. We'll be doing a couple more mock drafts probably throughout the next few weeks. I think we're going to get our friends from Chargers Unleashed on with us, and maybe we'll do a dueling quad mock with all 4 of us to see who comes out on top. So we'll have some fun with that. So stay tuned, obviously, for that. But right now, Jamal, let's talk a little bit. Justin Herbert is currently in contract negotiations, or they're ongoing. Haven't heard too much about it. Basically, we've heard from Staley and Telesco both saying that, conversations have been good. Don't expect any issue with the deal getting done. Let me ask you this first before we even start comparing to other QBs and whatnot. Do you think, just in your own personal opinion, do you think they get a deal done before this season starts, or does he go into the year on the last year of his deal and they'll have to get something done kind of mid-season to next year?
I think he's going to go in getting he's still on his last contract in the last year of his contract. And I think part of that is because there's a lot of volatility right now on what is the quarterback market and what is that line. And I know we'll get into it, but I think for that reason, that lack of clarity of how to set the market, how to think about the quarterback market, I think will force the Chargers to play a little bit of wait and see.
Yeah, let's just get into it. So you have obviously the Lamar Jackson situation, who requested a trade. Now he is currently franchise tagged with, I think it's called the non-exclusive tender or tag.
Yep.
So other teams can offer, but obviously then they'll be giving up 2 first-round picks if the Ravens do not match that offer. No one's bid on that. I don't anticipate the Ravens to trade him. So that's such an interesting. Let's just talk about that first. Such an interesting situation. We've heard from all sides of the coin of agents coming out and saying, I think Drew Rosenhaus was just on Pat McAfee's show saying, if I was his agent, I would have already got a deal done. That's what I do. I get deals done. And so obviously agents are going to talk themselves up. They want a little piece of the pie as well, but basically saying, hey, if this guy wasn't repping himself, we'd probably have a guaranteed deal done. Reports came out that he had a guaranteed deal. I think it was 3 years, $133 million, putting him right at $45 million a year. He turned that down. I think he wants 5 or 6 years guaranteed. So the whole thing's a mess. This obviously plays into these Justin Herbert talks. I don't think it'll come to that by any means, but his market is going to set kind of what Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert do down the line. So I'm trying to think of a question to ask because I'm just spitting out a bunch of different stuff. But so first of all, do you think Lamar Jackson is a Raven next year? Do you think you see him in a different uniform?
It's a really good question, Ryan. I think that if I were the Ravens and he said no to the 3 for 133 guaranteed, I think you got to trade him because I don't think Lamar Jackson is worth a 5 to 6 year guaranteed contract. I think that this team is a very specialized team. I think they've built their team around Lamar Jackson, but I think Lamar Jackson can only win a certain way. And I think when the Ravens get into the playoffs, his inability to consistently throw the ball down the field and consistently read defenses and win with his arm ultimately are going to hold this team back from getting to a Super Bowl and winning a Super Bowl, especially when you look at the quarterbacks in the AFC. I mean, let's be honest here. I think we love Lamar Jackson. I'm a huge fan of his. I love him on the field. I love him off the field. He's so dynamic, MVP, arguably the greatest athlete to ever play quarterback. I mean, in terms of just mobility. But can you see a world where Lamar Jackson beats Patrick Mahomes and or a Joe Burrow and or a Josh Allen and or a Justin Herbert all in one playoff run to get to a Super Bowl? I certainly don't. Not with his ability as a thrower. And so I think if you're the Ravens, the question becomes, hey, maybe lightning strikes. Maybe we have a great regular season. We get a bye. We're at home. One of these guys gets hurt. One of them has an off game. We sort of backdoor our way into the Super Bowl and find a way to win one. And so let's give it kind of 3 years to see that shake out before we sort of rebuild and start from scratch from the ground up. And so I understand the contract, and I think it's a very fair contract, to be honest with you, because all 133 are guaranteed. But the reality is if he's asking for 5 or 6, I think you're better off trading him and starting that rebuild process now. I think the contract that screwed everything up, Ryan, is the Deshaun Watson contract, the one that is 230 guaranteed. And I think it's been acknowledged that that was a mistake, that the Cleveland Browns really went out of pocket with the rest of the owners in the NFL and just were such an outlier in making this trade. Not even to mention kind of the morality and the ethics of it, of where he was in terms of his legal situation, but just, not even knowing whether he was going to play. And they just gave him this guaranteed contract that was $100 million more in guarantees than any other quarterback contract in history. So I think the fact that that's so out of pocket, I think all owners have said, listen, that was the Browns kind of being irrational and crazy. We don't even consider that as the market-setting contract because it's so unreasonable. What we consider as the market-setting contract is what Russell Wilson got. And and from that perspective, Lamar Jackson is right there in terms of guaranteed money. So I think Lamar is looking at Deshaun Watson and saying, I'm $100 million less in guaranteed money worth than Deshaun Watson, a guy who can't even stay on the field for a variety of reasons. And so he's feeling disrespected when in reality, that contract was just so unreasonable and unrealistic that it's creating this friction.
Yeah. I mean, it's like any business, right? If a company makes a mistake, but everyone wants to compare to that mistake, I mean, it's just not reality. I mean, they're living in an alternate universe up there in Cleveland, apparently, with that deal. And I think obviously it looks like a huge mistake and regret right now. And I'm not even getting into the morality stuff, but just for even playing the field. Now we'll see if it gets better in the next year or two, but I don't think it's still, it's a mess. But that clearly is what Lamar is going for. And, the Ravens, I think, played ball for a little bit from reports we were hearing about the 3-year 133. I think that's a pretty dang good deal when you kind of think about it and break it down, and fully guaranteed 3 years. The last before Deshaun that I can think of, and I'm thinking off the top of my head here, but the last fully guaranteed deal I can think of for QB was Kirk Cousins, which was a 3-year deal also, but it was for $84 million. So, obviously Lamar Jackson, a much better quarterback than Kirk Cousins, but that's also a solid almost, $50 million more fully guaranteed over the same year period. So to me, that seems very kind of respectful. Like, okay, we see you, obviously that was a 5-year-old deal now and things have changed, but how this plays out is absolutely going to have an effect on what Justin Herbert is able to do. And before we pivot to now what Herbert will do, what you think kind of comes down, just to kind of put a bow on the Jackson thing, I'm going to ask you and then I'll tell you mine. What team do you think he fits with the best? And it could be in Baltimore, say, if they can get it done, or is there a team, and I'm putting you on the spot, if you want, I'll answer first, you can think about it, but is there a team out there where you're like, man, that would be a perfect fit for him?
Patriots. I think that
okay.
Lamar Jackson on the Patriots would actually be a perfect fit. I think that I think Belichick kind of wants to go back to his roots a little bit. When you think about the early 2000s Patriots, when you think about those early 90s, late 80s Giants teams with LT, I think he's going back. He wants to go back to the basics of we're going to run the ball. We're going to play great defense. We're going to be situationally sound in terms of time of possession, in terms of third down conversions, in terms of penalties. And we're going to play action football when we need to. And our quarterback's going to need to make timely throws, but we want to ground and pound and get back to the basics. And I think that chip on his shoulder of Belichick wanting to show that he can win without Brady, and coupled with the chip on Lamar's shoulder of not being able to win and not being able to not just win in Baltimore, but not getting that respect from Baltimore to get that extension, I think that's a match made in heaven. And so I think for me, if I were the Patriots, I would be trying to figure out how I make this happen, because I don't think Mac Jones necessarily is the future. I think Lamar gives you this just such a unique element, and Bill Belichick has never had like a running quarterback before. What he does with that, I think could be really, really unique in the framework of what he's trying to do.
Yeah, it would certainly be interesting. And obviously there's been talks of Belichick shopping Mac Jones anyway, and maybe it was for something like that. It'd be funny because if Lamar truly wants respect in the front office, he's not going to get that in New England either.
Right.
So they're not necessarily pulling out the checkbook for anything or overvaluing. They just move on very quickly. So it would be interesting to see how that relationship would match. For me, the one that I would love to see, first of all, if I'm Lamar, if I'm not staying in Baltimore, I'm getting the hell out of the AFC. I'm going to the NFC somewhere. Obviously, he has no real say unless he, is able to negotiate and get a team to give him a deal. Then they just give up the 2 first-round picks. But for me, and I love the rebirth that we've seen from Jared Goff, but Lamar Jackson in Detroit would be a ton of fun in that offense with those weapons, with the likes of, their head coach and all the different characters they have there, what they're doing in Detroit. I think he'd be a great fit in the city of Detroit. And I think that to me would be a match made in heaven, because it gets you out of the AFC into a weaker NFC QB class. It gets you in a division now where you're going up against Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins, and Jordan Love. And it gets you in a city you can fit well. You have arguably the best weapons you've ever had at receiver, because that's one thing Baltimore hasn't really done, is given him toys in the receiver room like other teams have done, like the Chargers done for Herbert, like the Bills have done for Allen, like the Bengals have done for Burrow. Baltimore, for whatever reason, has not done that for Lamar. Part of it is because of the offensive scheme they're running. But, man, if he can end up in Detroit, and again, I love what Jared Goff has become and his kind of rebirth there, but I don't think anyone would mistake Jared Goff for Lamar Jackson in terms of an upgrade at the QB position. That'd be a lot of fun.
I think it'd be a lot of fun, Ryan. I completely agree with you. I don't know about the max, though. I think there's going to have to be some retooling on the offensive line and in tight end at running back to be able to sort of make that work. I think Dan Campbell with Lamar Jackson would be a ton of fun, but I think that there would probably need to be a year and a half of adjustment in terms of personnel, because, again, you can only win with him a certain way. I'll tell you the other one that really, would it's not possible given, what's happened over there in terms of burnt capital and all of that. Think about Lamar Jackson on the Niners. I mean, with Kyle Shanahan and those toys, and you talk about another guy who's essentially positionless, right? I mean, Lamar Jackson and Debo and Christian McCaffrey and Kittle and all of those guys, that would be a frightening proposition where, the Kyle Shanahan mind gets to work with this very unique dynamic athlete. So that would be another one that I think would be a ton of fun for the NFL. Not so fun for us in LA as Rams folks and folks that, have that rivalry with that division, but that could be another fascinating one as well.
So whenever this gets done, whether he plays under the tag or what, the two big names, obviously, to look at are then Justin Herbert, who we're talking about, and Joe Burrow. So who do you think flinches first, Burrow or Herbert? They're both sitting there saying like, well, whoever signs first the second one's going to get more, or at least dead even. And so it's almost like this weird waiting game where it's like, I don't want to be the first one because then the other one will probably get paid more. Who do you think goes first?
I would, if I were the Chargers, I would want to do it first because
for sure.
I think that, when you look at Burrow and kind of the swag and, Burrow knows what he's worth. And I think that the Bengals will pay him whatever he wants, frankly, because I think they've kind of seen the rebirth of the Bengals after being, the bottom of the NFL for 30 years. And so I think if I'm the Chargers, I have to do this first because otherwise I'm really going to get so far out of pocket of what I can afford. It's going to get a little gnarly because I'm going to get Justin Herbert and then have no money left over to give him any toys for the foreseeable future. And I think this is also where, Telesco and Spanos, this is where that Deshaun Watson contract also really hurts because, is Herbert mature enough? I think he is. Are the people around him mature and reasonable enough to say, hey, the market's at 130, so maybe Herbert gets 180 in guaranteed money, or maybe Herbert gets 200 in guaranteed money. But I don't know if they have the checkbook to give him 230 in guaranteed money, even though that's technically the market. But I could see a scenario where Burrow, wants more than 230 and they give it to him. And now all of a sudden the market's set at like 250. And you could be in a situation where Herbert's not a Charger anymore. And so I think if you're the Chargers right now, you got to be working, I think, pretty vigorously to try and get a deal done. I think if you're Herbert, you want to wait and set the market and play it out. But I think the Watson deal makes me very nervous for the Chargers and Herbert. And I think getting beaten out by Burrow in a bidding war makes it even more nervous. It's almost catastrophic, Ryan. I mean, it could potentially set up the Chargers in a A-Rod-like situation, in a Giancarlo Stanton-like situation, even though it's a different sport where they paid these guys so much. And they had no other money to run the team. And you and I have talked a lot about the Spanos family. And yes, they are billionaires, and yes, they are owners, but they're balling on a budget. If they say they're billionaires on a budget, and if this guy's going to end up costing 250, 300, I don't know if you can build a team around him.
Yeah, I mean, for all the blunders, the Spanos family, this would probably be the biggest if they end up, fudging up this contract and Justin Herbert ends up not in a Chargers uniform. I can't see that happening, but I mean, there's definitely a possibility for everything you just listed. What do you think? Because obviously the big thing is guaranteed money in this, and then there's years. You see the Mahomes deal, which was, an uncharacteristic 10-year deal worth $500 million. But the norm is usually between 4 and 6. Do you foresee the Herbert deal being kind of in that 5-year range? And, the market right now in terms of yearly average, I think Rodgers is at 50, Russ is at 49, Deshaun's at 48, and kind of down below after that. Do you foresee him being right at that, trying to get that 50 per year at a 5-year clip kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's a 5 for 270. I think it's a 54 a year. You sort of set the market a little bit. I think it's 5 for 270, and I think 180 of that 270 is guaranteed. I think that's or 200 of that 270 is guaranteed. I think that's where you are, and I think if you can do that fast, that might even be sort of a bargain, or certainly fair market value given how everything else is playing out. I think if you wait and if you try and nickel and dime it, I think it can go the other way. But I think that what would be reasonable for Herbert is a 5 for 270 where 180 to 200 is guaranteed.
Yeah. The real thing that Herbert has going for him, but the Chargers do as well, is the dude hasn't missed a game his entire career. Didn't start the first 2 as a rookie, or first 1 as a rookie. But he's played every game, even with the rib injury, we all know, but played through it, played very well. Whereas you have the likes of Joe Burrow, who I don't think this will affect his contract negotiations at all, but missed an entire season or pretty much an entire season. And, other of these quarterbacks have had injury history. If Deshaun can get what he got, well, we can't even compare to that because that was just lunacy, missing a whole year, all the out the field stuff and still getting that. So like you said, the market is what Russell Wilson got, and what Denver, as bad as that contract looks because of the year he had, Denver was doing exactly what the Chargers should be doing now, is just trying to get ahead of it. Because if they would have waited to re-sign, and, obviously things change with how bad the year was last year, but if he plays well, let's say this year, then they would have been looking at, 200 guaranteed for a 34-year-old quarterback, and they would have priced themselves out. So the Chargers have to get in front of this thing, have to do it quick. I think we can probably touch on it a little bit more, and then we'll do some more just kind of LA generic talk here at the final segment for radio. So if you're on podcast, we'll be right back after a break. We'll do a little bit more Chargers talk on podcast, and on radio, we'll see you for the final 20 as we really do kind of rapid fire LA football talk. So this is the LA Football Show. Jamal Matty Rondauer. Be right back with you. Getting back into some Chargers talk to wrap up. We were talking Justin Herbert, talking contract negotiations, talking Burrow, talking Lamar, as all these are going to have big implications, for Herbert and for the future of this Chargers franchise. Is this the most important? I mean, you look at the Chargers quarterback history. They had the great Dan Fouts, they had the great Phillip Rivers, and now they have Justin Herbert. Is this the most important contract negotiation in maybe Chargers history, you think?
Yes. And I think because if you somehow gaff here and you get rid of Justin Herbert, you are really flirting with obsolescence as a franchise. Because the one thing you always had going for you when you were bad was that you were in San Diego. And it was the Padres and it was the Chargers. And if you're bad in LA now, you're going to be like the 12th most watched team in the market when you throw in the NBA and baseball and the Rams and everything that's going on in college, and you're sort of forgotten. So to me, if I'm the Spanos family, if I'm Telesco, I am looking at different knobs. And whether that is, we talked about 5 for $270 guaranteed. One knob is guaranteed money, shorter years. One knob is longer contract, less guaranteed money. And then the third knob that no one's really talking about, that was only talked about with one player, the GOAT, when it was the flirtation with Miami, is, do you give him equity in the franchise? I mean, I think it's that, that's the knob that can sort of magically sort of overcome some things. And, where you're signifying to him, to your point earlier, Ryan, where he hasn't missed a game in 3 years and he's in his mid-20s, and this is going to be the quarterback for the next 10 to 12 years. And this is your first marquee player since being in LA and really trying to make a name for yourself as LA's team. Because guess what? If you become LA's football team, the valuation of your franchise is going to go up fourfold. And so even giving him a couple of percentage points in your business, in your team, is going to pay off so significantly down the line because it's going to make everyone's pockets fatter. So that to me is the interesting one, where would they offer him some percentage of the team to really sweeten that deal and secure this opportunity to have a Justin Herbert era with the Chargers that lasts over a decade?
He can have Dee's portion. She's trying to sell. Dean's sister, right? She's trying to get out and just give it all to Herbert, give it all to Justin. That's a great. I didn't even think about that, and that's so. Not even so rare. It's literally never happened outside of the illegal conversations with Brady and the Dolphins. But that'd be really cool, and I'd be really smart if they're cash poor for the guaranteed or whatever. And it's so important, Jamal, because Justin Herbert is to the Chargers what the Rams hoped Jared Goff would be, right? Like, they first moved to LA. They wanted to make a splash in their new city, returning home. And so they traded up for the number 1 pick to get a quarterback that would grow with them in this city. Drafted Jared Goff to be the face of the Rams and the face of LA football. This was before the Chargers had moved back. Well, the Chargers come to LA and they draft Herbert as an LA Charger. He wasn't a San Diego Charger that then moved up here like Phillip Rivers. He was born as an LA Charger, and he's become not only the face of the franchise, And for whatever anyone wants to say about the Chargers as an LA, macro team within the macrocosm of sports here, Herbert is one of the most popular players in LA sports, whether you're a Chargers fan or not. He's not like, vivacious by any means, but the fact that he was drafted here, he's very good, very talented. He's got the look. I mean, he's so important to this team, this franchise, this city. And so they got to do whatever it takes to make sure that nothing gets out of whack and he is here long-term. And, maybe we'll see a 10-year deal like Mahomes. Maybe we'll see equity come and play. Or maybe we'll just quietly see a 5-year deal, 200 guaranteed, and we just move forward and nothing is concerning at all. So either way, I truly believe it gets done just because of how important it is. And it's very rare. Trying to think if it has happened outside of this Lamar thing where a franchise quarterback ends up not getting re-signed to at least one deal. I mean, he's still on a rookie contract. Can you think of any? I can't think of any where a future franchise QB didn't even make it past a rookie deal.
No, and they're usually on the second deal, the third deal, and it just speaks to how rare a great quarterback is. I mean, it's the hardest position in all of sports, and even when it's in a quarterback-rich era, maybe there's 8 guys who are elite out of 32, and I think we're in a place right now where maybe only 4 or 5 guys are elite right now. So I think that the market is all in Justin Herbert's favor, and I agree with you. I think it'll get done, and what a beautiful symbol it would be actually if he got equity in the franchise, as you grow with us. We're in this together, and he could go down as one of the all-time great LA icons. I mean, everyone forgets Magic got an equity stake in the Lakers, as part of it. It was a 25-year, $25 million contract and a little bit of a piece of the Lakers when Jerry Buss signed him, because he saw the vision. He saw it in terms of, this is the guy who's going to be the orchestrator of Showtime, and I'm going to bring the Laker girls, and I'm going to bring like a college element to the NBA game, and it's going to feel like a Broadway show, and I'm going to bring all the movie stars, and he's going to be my orchestrator. He's going to be my conductor. He's going to be my choreographer to make all of this happen and really just turn the city upside down. And, you wonder, is there an opportunity here for the Spanos family to have that level of vision to say, this is the guy that is going to make, in 10 years, when you think LA football, the first name you think of is the Chargers. It's not the Rams. It's not USC. It's the Chargers. And we'll think back to this era of saying, you remember the time back in the late 2010s and the early 2020s when like the Rams owned LA? Well, now, that feels so far away. This has that ability, if it all hits, to be able to have happen. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And so final question on this, and let's wrap up. We got some UCLA stuff to talk about as well to wrap up. The biggest thing, and we surprisingly haven't seen it have as big as an effect as it would seem on paper. When you sign the big contract quarterback, the thought is, well, now you're not going to have any money to pay anyone else. Well, the Chiefs obviously have debunked that. The Rams have debunked that. The Cowboys haven't won anything, but they've at least been competitive and made the playoffs. The Buccaneers won, obviously, with Brady's big contract. I mean, it was only a 2-year deal, but the high-end yearly salary. So, I mean, seemingly there's ways to get around that. So, question for you is, let's say Justin Herbert ends up getting, at the time, we'll say he gets the highest paid, $52 million per year. Seeing how the Chargers kind of do contracts and they're not as big. This year, they've finally, for the first time, kind of done some, moving some money around, and they don't typically do that. They kind of just, the contract you get is how it sits, and they don't play around with it, but they have this year. Is he a guy, we talk about him all the time, obviously, he's the mainstay of this program and of this team, but is he a guy that we see in the second iteration of contract that, trying to think the best way to phrase this. So we've been talking about this offseason. You got to give the tools to Herbert, right? You got to invest in your quarterback, give him all the toys, give him the offensive line, give him everything he needs to be successful. Now you give him $52 million a year. And so you may not be able to give him all the tools and all the stuff that he needs. Is he a guy you think in year 5, 6, 7, 8 will be that much better than he is now to elevate everyone around him, where he doesn't necessarily need 2 number 1 receivers and a really good third and a really good fourth, he can elevate guys like that? Or is he someone that might concern you a little bit, making $52 million, that they're not going to have enough talent around him to really go anywhere?
He better be. So that's the answer. He better be. Because when you're putting that kind of money into him, then there's certain expectations. Ryan, I'm going to push back on something you said a little bit earlier. I don't know if it's really worked where you've given a quarterback a huge amount of money and you've had money left over to be successful. I think that in Mahomes' case, he's that special. I mean, they shedded Tyreek Hill because they didn't want to pay him. The only other guy that's getting paid was Kelsey and Chris Jones. They shedded Tyrann Mathieu when it was time to pay him. They
already paid Tyreek, though.
Sorry?
They'd already paid Tyreek, though. He just wanted.
Yeah, but it wasn't that contract wasn't hitting their books that hard, right? It was still early in that contract. So, I mean, Tyreek is now getting the back end of that contract in Miami, and that's where his compounding value is coming from. So the moment, he was getting expensive, they got rid of him because they said, well, Mahomes is a guy who can do it with anyone. And they were proven right. I think in Brady's case, he got paid big. And I think Brady had a LeBron-like effect in Tampa, where I think other guys came in to wanting to play with him and were willing to take lesser money to play with the GOAT and win a ring, and it all worked out. And I think in the Rams case, it worked, but then, it's combusted now, and you're sort of rebuilding and retooling and refurnishing and all of those things. So I don't know if it actually works in terms of being able to pay these guys and pay others. What you're essentially saying is, I am paying this guy because he's transcendent. And whether I have a $20 million receiver or a $6 million receiver, this guy's so good, he's going to keep me in contention. Whether I have a first-round pick at running back or I have somebody undrafted, he's going to keep me in contention. And so that's the expectation. And so then I think as fans, as analysts, as ownership, as partners, as sponsors, we can't treat them with the training wheels at that point. It's, well, you're getting superstar, beyond superstar, iconic player money. Now the narrative can't be, oh, well, he doesn't have a true number one, and so how do you expect him to play and do all of these things? Now you got to step into that role. You got to step into those pants, and you got to wear them. It's sort of the line was, remember that famous line that in the All-Star game back in 2003, Michael Jordan saw Kobe wearing his shoes, and he says, yeah, you might be wearing my shoes, but you can never fill them. And Kobe didn't talk to anybody for 2 weeks, and Jordan, as a wizard, came to Staples for the last time, and Kobe dropped 55 on him and 42 in the first half because he was so, tightly wound from that. So the question for Justin Herbert's going to be, okay, man, you've got the shoes, you got the money, now can you fill them? And so I think that will be the level of expectation will really change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, I think the expectation already has changed. We've talked about that all offseason or all during the season of, obviously we love the guy, but it's time to elevate to the next level, and no more excuses. And now with Kellen Moore, and if he gets the big paycheck, and which he will, and it's deserved. To an extent, in terms of just quarterback market value, it's deserved. So we'll see. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Let me ask you this question, and it just came to me. Is there a world, and this is gnarly, and this is wild, and this is very out of the box, but is there a world where the Chargers don't give him an offer? Where, let's say this season plays out, you've got Kellen Moore, a top 5 offensive coordinator. You got 2 really good receivers. You got Ekeler back. You got all of these toys on offense, on defense. And let's say the Chargers don't make the playoffs. If you're sitting there with Spanos and you're saying, is this really my guy? With all of this, and he doesn't make the playoffs, am I really going to put $50 million a year into this guy? Or do I eat it and start the rebuild process again? Because maybe this guy isn't my guy.
Fascinating question. Any fans listening right now are punching air and punching the steering wheel, but it's a real legit question.
I'm just asking the question. I'm asking the question as an investor, as a businessman. If you've given him everything now, you've given him the coach, you've given him the receivers, the tight end, the running back, this all-world defense, Derwin and Khalil Mack and everybody in the secondary, you're this all-star team. If they don't make the playoffs again this year, is he worth $50 million?
I mean, it's a valid question. Obviously, Brandon Staley will take the fall first. He'll be out for sure. The coach will take the fall first. It goes down to, and the Chargers have been very fortunate in the baton passing between quarterbacks, but it goes down to every organization never wants to be in that QB purgatory. And that's why they overpay quarterbacks, because as soon as you found someone that's even halfway decent, you're throwing the bag because you don't want to go through the process of a free agent vet or a bridge QB or, trading up in the draft, losing assets. So I can't see a world where they do not do something to make sure Herbert's back. Now, the question is very fair, because whether you believe in Staley or not, and I'm not saying you, just in general, whether people believe in Brandon Staley as a head coach or not, at some point you have so many assets at your disposal as a quarterback. If you are great, you should be getting to the promised land, right? I mean, I compare a lot, and I know Chargers fans probably don't like this, but I compare a lot to the Broncos. And Dan Reeves, I don't think was a terrible coach, but Dan Reeves did a lot to sabotage Elway's career, and it didn't matter. They still went to 3 Super Bowls with Elway, with putrid offenses, bad offensive line, bad defenses, and Elway was that great. He carried those teams past his coach to Super Bowls. And so if Herbert is going to be a $52 million man per year and is as great as we all believe he is, a lot of these outside forces and inside forces, including the coach, shouldn't matter a whole hell of a lot. You got to get past that. And so as an investor, if we're looking at it from a business sense, it's a very legit question. Now, just seeing as history of organizations, to give you a pointed answer, I don't see a world where the Chargers let that happen, just because you don't want to be in that QB purgatory by any means. Now, wouldn't it be even more fascinating if we talk all the time about, Caleb Williams to the Rams, right? Like, this is the remodel year, but maybe they'll trade up and get Williams. What if the Chargers say, you know what? We don't want to pay $52 million to Herbert. We love him, but we'll just trade up and let's go get Caleb Williams next year as Herbert's contract expires. Wouldn't that be fascinating?
Oh my God. We're in the middle of April here, Ryan, because it is the ideas are free flowing right now in the heart of the off season. I love the thought and in terms of just as a creative exercise. And I pose the question. I completely agree with you. I think the realities of just how rare this position is, there really isn't a world where the Chargers don't re-up Herbert. But it's a fascinating question, because I think what it really alludes to now is we're at that period with Herbert and the Chargers where it's no more excuses. It's time to put up or shut up. They have to make the playoffs, and they have to be in that Big Four conversation in the AFC. It's time. And, he's old enough now. He's got enough starts under his belt. They got enough weapons around him. Staley's now a third-year head coach. He's comfortable in his own skin. We're running out of excuses here for the Superchargers to really supercharge. And so I think completely agree with you in terms of your entire assessment. It'd be fascinating. And I'll add one last layer, Ryan, as our sort of last part of the conversation. What if Caleb becomes a Charger and then the Rams don't do anything next year and they start selling the house? They trade Kupp, they trade Donald, they trade Stafford for all of these picks, and then they sign Herbert to be the pillar as they build around.
Oh, man.
Let's get the Game of Thrones. Let's get the Game of Thrones and LA football really on fire.
That would be wild. We wanted a world, Jamal, where Justin Herbert and Caleb Williams were the 2 LA quarterbacks. I just don't think we ever thought it'd be for the opposite teams, which would be unbelievable. But don't see it happening in real life. And last thing, and we were going to talk UCLA, but we're of course running out of time here, so we'll just wrap up with this. But last point, and we don't want to always sound like we're harping on it, but when you look at Josh Allen and the Bills, when you look at Joe Burrow and the Bengals, when you look at some of these other AFC quarterbacks, and when you look at Trevor Lawrence and the Jags, like, what do they have that Justin Herbert doesn't have? And there's nothing. I mean,
nothing.
It's equal. It's an equal playing field. And so at some point, it's who is the better quarterback that's going to put up and elevate. And, Josh Allen has a defensive head coach. Trevor Lawrence has a coach that was fired and then came back on and was good and then bad and then good again in the playoffs. And, Joe Burrow has a coach that was going to be fired before Joe Burrow took off, basically. So at some point, it's got to be, is Justin Herbert worth the $50 million a year? Is he a top 5 quarterback? I think we both believe he has the potential to be there and certainly can be there. I think he will get there, but it's time to get there, and we'll see if that happens. So with that, that is all the time we got. This is the LA Football Show. Thank you all for tuning in and making us a part of your day. We certainly appreciate it. For Jamal Madney, I'm Ryan Dyer. Everyone have a blessed weekend. We'll talk to you all on Monday for live LA football talk, 6 to 6:30 Rams talk, 6:30 to 7 Chargers talk, 7 to 7:30 Trojans talk, and 7:30 to 8 your UCLA Bruins talk. So Jamal, thanks as always. Thank you all for tuning in. Everyone have a blessed weekend. Take care.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.